Have you ever wondered why certain men appear completely unaffected by your absence, regardless of everything you've invested in them? Many women believe that creating longing requires disappearing, neglecting messages, or playing games of indifference. However, the reality is quite different. The foundation of genuine yearning doesn't stem from physical absence, but from emotional connection. When belonging exists, when authentic emotional impact is present, absence transforms into emptiness. And it's this void that makes someone seek again. Consider how many times you've given yourself completely, been present, affectionate, attentive, yet still felt that from the other side came only silence or indifference. This occurs because the human mind doesn't value the predictable. When everything is already secured, there's no space for lack. What generates longing isn't being constantly available, but creating an emotional experience that leaves a mark. Jung stated that everything we suppress, everything we fail to examine, returns as shadow, and in relationships it's no different. When emotional connection isn't present, a void emerges that needs filling. This emptiness is what provokes the sensation of lack, what awakens the desire to return. This is why so many people deceive themselves believing that sex, beauty, or even initial attraction are sufficient to keep someone close. Men and women don't betray or distance themselves because they found someone better, but because they felt alone beside who was there. Loneliness within a relationship is what most destroys bonds, and what most feeds the necessity to seek outside what wasn't found inside. Understanding, embrace, emotional presence. True longing is born from this contrast between having lived something that touched deeply and suddenly losing that access. When you grasp this, everything shifts. The game stops being about disappearing to see if he misses you and becomes about creating an emotional mark so powerful that absence becomes unbearable. It's when he remembers a phrase of yours, a sensation only you brought, a care nobody else offered. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. The human being is moved by what emotionally affects them, by what penetrates them, by what awakens within them something not found anywhere else. And here lies the first key turn. It's not about being always present, but about being unforgettable, even when you're not there. When a man truly connects emotionally, any absence becomes presence. He cannot escape the trail you've left, because longing doesn't originate from physical distance. It originates from emotional impact. And it's precisely at this point that transformation begins, because when you understand how to create this impact, you discover how to provoke a longing that isn't resolved merely with a message or quick encounter. It's a longing that grows, that unsettles, that makes him search. And the most curious thing is that this process doesn't depend on you being perfect, nor doing more than you already do. It depends on understanding the difference between offering predictable affection and offering a unique emotional experience. And from this moment, the question changes. How to awaken this absence that weighs, this void that transforms into desire. It's exactly about this that we'll discuss in the next step. And if, while I spoke until here, you felt that some part touched exactly on your reality, this is the moment to truly participate. When you leave a like on this video, it's not just a clicked button. It's a signal that this conversation makes sense, that this message needs to continue reaching more women who also feel lost or invisible in love. This is how this space grows, strengthens, and keeps alive this network of consciousness. And more, I want to hear you. Each story that appears in the comments is like a mirror for another woman who might be going through the same pain. So right here, have you already lived this sensation of giving yourself completely and still not being valued? Have you already felt the void that's born when someone doesn't see your worth? Share, because your voice matters and your experience can embrace who needs to read that they're not alone. And if you're not yet part of this community, subscribe to the channel right now and activate the bell. This way, you won't miss the next steps of this journey that can transform your way of loving and positioning yourself within a relationship. Each video here is thoughtfully designed to bring clarity, strength, and consciousness to you who wants to be remembered, desired, and respected. So leave your like, comment, and subscribe, because this path only makes sense when we walk together. Understanding male emotional withdrawal. When we discuss longing and distancing, it's common to think that men simply cool off because they lost interest or because another person exists. But actually, psychology shows something much deeper and much more human. Different from what many women believe, men do feel intensely, but from early on were socially trained not to demonstrate vulnerability. They grew up hearing phrases like, "Swallow your tears, men don't suffer, men don't get attached." Others, and this creates an invisible but very powerful barrier between what they feel and what they can show. When a man feels criticized, pressured, or misunderstood within a relationship, it's not uncommon for him to enter a state that psychology calls fight or flight. It's as if the body reacted automatically to protect itself. Some explode, argue, raise their voice, but the vast majority choose flight. They close off, become silent, distance themselves. And it's precisely in this distancing that so many women feel rejected, as if they were no longer important, when actually what's happening is a mechanism of emotional regulation. He doesn't know how to deal with that intensity of feelings, and to avoid feeling even more vulnerable creates distance. This doesn't mean he doesn't miss you. Quite the contrary, most of the time, this silence isn't punishment. It's an unconscious way of trying to reorganize his own mind. It's as if, facing emotional overload, he needed to disconnect to avoid collapse. And here enters a fundamental key. When a woman understands this mechanism, instead of insisting or demanding even more, she manages to position herself in a way that awakens in him the desire to return and not the necessity to flee. Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, this internal place where we store everything we don't know how to handle. And in the modern man, many of these shadows are connected to fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, fear of losing the respect of whom he loves. So, when he distances himself, often it's not from her that he's fleeing, but from this internal confrontation with his own fragilities. The problem is that on this side, for the woman, the sensation is of abandonment, indifference, invisibility. And this mismatch is precisely what feeds so much pain in relationships. Think, well, how many times have you already interpreted his silence as lack of love, when actually it could be a silent scream of internal confusion? How many times have you felt you needed to give even more, when actually space was what could bring balance back? This inversion is brutal, because the more you insist, the more he closes off. And the more he closes off, the more you suffer. It's as if each movement toward him pushed him further away. But when we begin to look at this behavior not as rejection, but as an attempt at self-regulation, everything changes. You stop insisting on immediate contact and begin to understand the importance of leaving space so he feels your absence in a healthy way. It's not about distancing yourself out of pride, nor about playing games, but about understanding that even longing needs space to be born. And it's precisely here that the opportunity to transform the dynamic enters. Because the man who feels respected in his way of dealing with emotions begins, little by little, to see in that woman not a threat, but a safe harbor. He returns not because he was charged, but because he missed being in that place of acceptance and balance. This is the moment when the psychology of masculine solitude stops being a painful mystery and becomes a key of understanding. Because understanding why they distance themselves is the first step to learning how to create the right space for them to want to return. The physical-emotional connection, dynamic. There exists a point where differences between men and women become more evident, and often it's precisely there that conflicts are born. For men, physical intimacy is more than pleasure. It's a channel of emotional reconnection. By not having been encouraged to talk about their fragilities, many men find in touch and sex the only legitimate form of expressing affection, vulnerability, and even need for care. The body becomes the bridge to something they don't know how to verbalize, a way to feel belonging and emotional relief without needing to admit their pains in words. Already for women, the path is usually opposite. Through all the history of vulnerability and the cultural weight of always needing to protect themselves, they only manage to truly surrender physically when they already feel emotionally secure. They need to trust, feel embrace, feel they are seen and understood. It's this emotional base that opens space for intimacy to happen naturally. When this security doesn't exist, the body closes, even if desire exists. This mismatch between both sides is the root of many crises in relationships. The man seeks emotional connection through the physical, while the woman only manages to access the physical when emotional connection already exists. It's as if each one were waiting for the other to take the first step. And in the middle of this impasse arise frustrations, distancing, and even discussions that seem endless. But instead of being an insurmountable obstacle, this contrast can transform into the key of a deeper relationship. When a woman understands that his desire for the physical isn't just instinct or superficial pleasure, but an attempt to reconnect emotionally, she manages to see this gesture with other eyes. And when, instead of interpreting this search as neediness or selfishness, she offers empathy and embrace, a safe space is created where he can finally lower his guard. This posture awakens in him a genuine desire for closeness, because it's not just about sex, but the chance to be accepted in his vulnerability without fear of judgment. At the same time, when the man learns to offer this emotional embrace before seeking the physical, the woman feels she can relax, that she's protected, that there exists a space where she can open without reserves. It's at this point that both sides of the coin begin to align, and what before seemed a clash of worlds begins to transform into a dance of balance. This mutual understanding is what gives origin to the type of longing that doesn't born from physical absence, but from absence of connection. Because the body can be present, but if mind and heart don't meet, the void continues. Already when this true exchange exists, even a brief distancing transforms into a trigger for the most intense longing, that which makes one want to return, seek, reconnect. The art of communication that brings closer. Many times, when we think about improving a relationship, we believe the solution lies in resolving all conflicts. But the truth is that, according to research, 69% of couple discussions are never really solved. And still, many relationships continue firm and passionate. This is because the secret isn't in eliminating differences, but in learning to communicate in a way that brings closer instead of distancing. The big question is that most women, without realizing, end up using words that sound like criticism or accusations. And this activates in the man that defense mechanism we already discussed, the instinct to close off, become silent, or even distance himself. The turning point happens when you discover you can transform complaints into clear requests that, instead of suffocating or diminishing the other, awaken in him the will to be more present. Think with me. When you say, "You're lazy," what he hears is judgment, as if he weren't good enough. But when you speak, "I feel overwhelmed when I do everything alone. You could vacuum while I clean," the message gains another dimension. Instead of accusation, you bring vulnerability. Instead of criticism, an invitation. It's in this space that the man feels he can shine for you, that he can be useful, necessary, valued. And this, within the relationship, becomes the foundation for a connection that generates genuine longing when absent. Understanding masculine psychology serves as fuel for creating closeness, attraction, and even respect. Carl Jung spoke about how what we suppress or hide in our relationships returns as shadow. When what he hears from you consists only of demands, the shadow born from this becomes feelings of inadequacy and failure. However, when he receives your words as a positive request, this shadow transforms into an opportunity to demonstrate worth, into a desire to draw nearer. The male brain operates in a very practical manner. When faced with a problem, he wants to provide a solution. When you present your feelings alongside a clear request, you give him exactly what he needs to feel competent and significant. Notice how this shifts the dynamic. The man who previously felt pressured and withdrew now feels he can respond and approaches. He isn't being forced but invited. The most powerful aspect of this is that this language of positive vulnerability creates a new form of emotional connection that extends far beyond simply handling household tasks or ending arguments. It's an invitation for him to see you, feel you, and want to reconnect genuinely. This type of communication isn't manipulation, it's awareness. It's moving away from automatic criticism and entering the space of partnership, where every spoken word has the intention to build, not to destroy. The impact of this is profound. Instead of accumulating resentments, you begin accumulating moments of cooperation. And without realizing it, each small gesture like this becomes a brick that sustains desire, because nothing generates more attraction for a man than feeling recognized and admired by the woman he chose. If you've lived this experience, you know how transformative it is when a conversation ends with connection rather than cold silence. Perhaps you've even used this language without realizing it and noticed how he reacted differently. And here lies the true power in learning to speak in a way that makes the other want to listen, in opening space so he desires to stay even closer. There exists a very important difference between a man who distances himself because he's emotionally overwhelmed and one who will never truly feel longing for a much deeper reason, the inability to empathize. This second type is what we call a narcissistic profile. And the great trap lies precisely in the confusion many women make between temporary absence and permanent emptiness. When a man withdraws because he's dealing with his own emotions, there's a real chance for reconnection, because behind the silence are authentic feelings. In the narcissist's case, however, the emptiness will never be filled, no matter how much you try to give of yourself. This is the point where many women begin feeling insufficient. They do everything, try to please, show patience, make concessions, and still the feeling that remains is of not being good enough. The problem, however, isn't with them, but rather the fact that the narcissist doesn't have genuine capacity to connect emotionally. What he seeks isn't closeness, it's supply, attention, validation, energy that never truly satisfies. It's like filling a leaky bucket. The more you give, the more it drains out. Carl Jung already warned that when we attach ourselves to someone's shadow, we confuse manipulation with love. This is the most dangerous dynamic. Believing that emptiness is your responsibility and that if you try harder, love more, give more, you'll finally receive something back. But the truth is that the narcissist lives trapped in his own shadow and ends up projecting this onto the relationship. He seduces, involves, creates a narrative of initial enchantment, but soon the mask falls, and what remains is a cycle of neediness and frustration. How many times have you heard stories of women who say nothing they do seems sufficient? This is the direct reflection of this unequal relationship. The narcissist is incapable of feeling true absence because he was never really present. What he feels is the absence of the supply you represented, not your essence. That's why in these cases, he might even seek you out again, but not out of love or longing, rather from the need to feed his own ego. Recognizing this is the first step to freedom. It's stopping the search in scarcity for what only flourishes in reciprocity. Jung said that every time we deny what we see clearly, the shadow dominates us. And when you accept seeing that it's not lack of effort on your part, but lack of empathy on his, you open space for something new, a true bond, based on exchange, understanding, authentic desire for closeness. And perhaps here is the moment to ask yourself, how many times have you confused intensity with love, neediness with passion, manipulation with connection? If this reflection strikes you, write in the comments, "I choose to free myself." This simple phrase can be the symbol of your next step, a way to affirm to yourself that you won't confuse his emptiness with your identity anymore. The secret of women who manage to keep love alive doesn't lie in avoiding conflicts or creating a problem-free life, but rather in how they handle the small daily frictions. Science shows that truly happy couples aren't those who never argue, but those who learn to repair the relationship quickly. A sincere apology, an unexpected hug, a loving word in the midst of tension. These simple gestures have immense psychological power because they transmit emotional security. It's this security that awakens in men the feeling of belonging, which later makes them truly miss this presence when it's not beside them. Often we believe that what keeps a relationship alive are grand proofs of love, those striking declarations that seem straight out of a movie. But in real life, it's the small things that matter most. A thank you, a "you made my day better," a look of complicity in the rushed routine. These are the micro-expressions of care that daily nourish the bond and generate a sense of unique value. When these attitudes become a natural part of coexistence, they create emotional memories that become fixed in the masculine unconscious. And it's exactly these memories that, in absence, awaken genuine longing. The man might even distance himself for a time, but when he remembers how he was welcomed, respected, and valued, the contrast emerges with force. It's in this space of absence that the lack becomes evident. It's not the physical body he misses, but the emotional lightness that only that specific woman knew how to provide. Feminine power in relationships lies precisely in this capacity to create an emotional environment that doesn't suffocate, doesn't criticize excessively, but transmits affection, recognition, and respect. This doesn't mean a woman should carry the relationship's responsibility alone, much less nullify herself to maintain peace. On the contrary, it's about a conscious choice, using effective communication, empathy, and care as connection tools. When he realizes that beside you he doesn't need to be in a defensive state but can simply be, this space becomes irreplaceable. And in absence, the memory of this place of emotional security is what makes him seek, return, want to be close again. Perhaps you've lived this, being with someone who wasn't perfect, but who had that unique way of making you feel special. And later, when distance came, it was exactly this detail, and not the grand scenes, that left the void. It's the same mechanism that happens on the other side. When you offer emotional consistency, you become not only desired, but necessary, because you awaken in him something rare, the longing that comes from the heart, and not just from the skin. If this idea touched you, write in the comments, "I keep love alive." This phrase can be the symbol of your decision to value the details that truly create emotional memories. Choosing love every day might seem simple, but it's precisely this silent gesture that separates superficial relations from lasting connections. The longing that truly marks a man doesn't arise from games or manipulations, but from the balance between individuality and bond. When a woman demonstrates that she has her own life, that she values herself, that she knows how to care for herself while offering a space of emotional welcome, something changes profoundly in how he sees her. He begins associating this presence not just with desire or companionship, but with the feeling of home. And it's exactly this feeling that makes him want to return, seek, keep the relationship's flame alive. Within masculine psychology, there exists a curious paradox. On one hand, men seek independence and freedom. On the other, they carry an almost unconscious desire to find a safe harbor. It's in this contrast that true longing is born. Physical absence might hurt, But what really makes him feel the lack is the memory of how he feels when beside a woman who balances firmness and welcome. Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And when we speak of effective bonds, this phrase gains even more meaning. It's not by resisting longing that it disappears, it's by accepting it as part of the experience that it transforms into connection. It's at this point that feminine power in relationships enters, creating an emotional space that doesn't suffocate but also isn't indifferent. Small gestures, like a look that transmits confidence, a word that validates his effort, or even the lightness of shared laughter, become engraved in the masculine unconscious as memories he can't replace anywhere else. It's not the body he seeks when he feels the lack. It's this feeling of belonging, of being accepted without needing to hide fragilities. Therefore, the woman who maintains her feminine self-esteem and self-love in first place naturally becomes more magnetic. She doesn't need to beg for attention, because her posture alone awakens desire and respect. She understands that longing isn't created by forced absence, but by presence that leaves deep emotional marks. And when he realizes that beside her he can be who he is without fear of judgment, this memory becomes irresistible in the distance. Think for a moment. When you remember someone with longing, what truly comes to mind aren't the big events, but the small details. The way the person looked at you, how they spoke your name, that feeling of peace that was hard to find elsewhere. This is exactly what happens with them too, and it's this emotional memory that makes a man return, seek, want to be present again. If this made sense to you, write in the comments. I choose love every day. Rin. This simple declaration can be the symbol of how much you understand that true longing transforms into connection when there's authenticity, presence, and self-love. If you've made it this far, it's because this message spoke directly to your heart. And if at some moment in this video you felt something different, as if you'd seen love and masculine psychology from a new perspective, then this is the moment to take the next step. First, subscribe to the channel now, because each new video is an even deeper dive into this universe and I don't want you to miss anything. Then help me spread this message. Comment below, "I receive," if this reflection truly touched you. This simple act strengthens our community and shows that you're also committed to choosing love every day. Also leave your like, because that's how YouTube understands this content has value and takes this message to even more people who need to hear it. Your support makes all the difference in keeping this journey alive and constantly growing. And before leaving, don't forget, the next video is already here on screen. Click and continue this experience with me, because what comes next might be exactly the key turn that was missing to transform your way of loving and being loved.